All right, hello everyone. I'm Josh with On the Wrong Lead. We have Caleb, future BCBC participant here and probably winner. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the Woodbine Mile here. It's going to be race 9 on Saturday at Woodbine. 1 mile on the turf. This is their premier race of the year, at least as far as like the North American sphere goes. Some people might think their Queen's Plate Day is probably bigger, for the Canadians, but all eyes are going to be on Woodbine for this race. This is the big race. I believe it's also a win and you're in for the turf mile. Let's get right to it, Caleb. We kind of looked a little bit at the pace scenario here, and it to me on paper, it looks like a fairly hot pace. You have the speedster in the 6 Admiralty Pier that's in this race, and a lot of the strong horses are going to be coming from off the pace, like March to the Arch, Starship Jubilee, Value Proposition, and that's pretty much kind of where I ended up. Not in that order. I think I like March to the Arch the best. It's kind of my A play, with Value Proposition as my second pick, and Starship Jubilee kind of rounding out my top 3. Just a quick look at the pace scenario. You kind of see it the same way?
Yeah, I think I do see the pace setting up. Assuming all of the horses stay in, I do think we'll get a pretty honest pace here. I think Admiralty Pier is a horse that pretty much has one way to go, and it's to the front. Take him as far as he can, as long as he can, and just hope it's enough. I do think that the one-turn mile configuration of Woodbine's turf course is really going to help him out here. I don't think 2 turns is something he's going to be too great at in Grade 1 company. That being said, he is also cross-entered into race 7 today in the Grade 3 Singspiel. So that's a 1.25 mile race. The waters are obviously probably a little bit easier there, I would say. There aren't particularly any monsters in that field, and he would almost certainly project to make the lead there. But you do really have to wonder, if that's, does he really want to go that far? His pedigree suggests that he may. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they decide to run him in the Grade 3 race earlier in the day instead. Because if he doesn't end up running in the Woodbine Mile, then the pace for this race gets really murky. You have a horse like War of Will, who has a lot of tactical speed, but has really done most of his best running just off of the pace. Both his turf Grade 1 win last out came sitting that pocket trip. His Preakness win came the same fashion. Even all the way back to his Risen Star. He's always been a horse that likes to have a horse to stalk and pounce on, not necessarily go to the front himself. And then maybe a horse like Cheryl Spite, the 3, the young gun coming up here. 3rd career start, has all the hype in the world. Was supposed to go to the Kentucky Derby and ended up having to be a late defection due to developing a cough. The connection's kind of audible to point him here instead. Horse has a ton of speed. Horse has sprint speed, and you may elect to use it here, being lightly raced, and in a race that if Admiralty Pier would happen to scratch, then yeah, Cheryl Spite probably ends up sending for the lead, just because I think that would be the right thing for them to do here. It's a young horse who's lightly raced. Don't throw too much at him at once, especially in Grade 1 company while facing older. So yeah, I think that assuming Admiralty Pier stays in this race, which I kind of think that he will, we should get an honest pace. And I think that sets it up perfectly for the horse I like the best here, which is the one you've already mentioned, the one horse here, March to the Arch. I love March to the Arch here. He's going to be by far my strongest pick. If I end up playing horizontals, he's going to be a single A. I'm going to be I think 5-2 is more than fair if you actually get that. I'm hoping some of these other hype horses take more money and you might get 3-1 or 7-2. But even if you don't, I think 5-2 is value here for this horse. And I really like March to the Arch.
Yeah, I think, like you said, 5-2, I think is more than fair on this horse. War of Will is probably going to take a ton of money. War of Will is, just one of those name horses. And does have has backed up his reputation with that Maker's Mark Mile last out. And the Fig came back pretty strong. Is matches up with this field, but I mean 2-1 is a little short. And I kind of see him getting even shorter than that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 7-5, 6-5, or something on the War of Will. We talked a little bit of pedigree, I know, on some of these other horses. Now, interesting about War of Will, like, what would you think if they tried to stretch War of Will out a little bit further on the turf? Do you think that might be a little bit better for War of Will, or do you think that the mile is kind of where he's going to want to be?
Yeah, I don't think he'd have an issue going further. I mean, pedigree suggests he should be able to run almost all day. But we've sort of see him, not run his best necessarily when stretched out on the dirt. That's not to say that he wouldn't have completely different results on turf. But yeah, I would say that turf kind of puts you in an awkward spot where the majority of your top tier races are either right around a mile or into those more marathon-y mile and a half kind of ballparks. You don't see too many grade one 9 furlong kind of races, or 9.5 furlong races, which might be what he'd really be best at. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they stretched him out. It wouldn't surprise me if he does well on the stretch out based off of pedigree. But I don't think a mile's too short for him either. I think anything 2 turns is, well, not 2 turns per se, but I think a mile or longer is probably appropriate for a horse like him.
Yeah, I always forget with War of Will that he's got Sadler's Wells on the bottom, and so it's just always kind of like, man, this. I mean, this horse does scream, turf pedigree. It's nice that they finally got him on turf, and it seems like he's taken to it pretty well. But like you said, I'm going to try and beat this horse. I think it's going to be way too short. I am very interested in the 7 value proposition. On Briz, this horse doesn't look very strong. I mean, looks fine. Looks like a contender, but when you pull up the DRF and see the buyer figs, they tell a much different story. And the horse definitely looks a lot stronger on DRF. The horse probably looks like he should be second choice. And I kind of wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Chad Brown, Luis Contreras, a good turf jock up at Woodbine. Obviously Chad Brown is the preeminent turf trainer in the U.S. So this horse is going to take money. Like, you see 6-1 on the morning line, and you kind of laugh. I mean, not to say that we haven't seen Chad go off at 5, 6, 7, 8-1 and win and just like spit in all our faces. But I definitely see that this horse taking a little bit more money. And also the 4, Starship Jubilee, kind of that hometown horse, is 6-2-1 and 13 starts at Woodbine. And has that Boston Spa win, which is just a feather in her cap. And, I really think that, this horse, on her day could win this race. And the Diana kind of put up a kind of questionable effort. I mean, I know it was a slower pace. Maybe Starship Jubilee needs a more honest pace in order to do her best. But in this case, I could she is going to get a bit of an honest pace. I kind of think that she might end up being too short with those hometown connections. So I am going to use Starship Jubilee just because I think the pace is going to set up nicely for her. But like you said, March to the Arch, I think, is going to be the horse to beat in this race. 2 for 2 at Woodbine, has the best Woodbine figs. That King Edward was a really nice race. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally okay. Lone A, March to the Arch. I'll have the 2 Bs in Starship Jubilee and in value proposition. I'll probably play something like I don't know, 1-7 exact the box or something like that, and maybe mix in a little bit of War Will somewhere underneath. But unless Admiralty Pier scratches, I don't want any part of War Will.
Yeah, I think War of Will becomes probably a must use if Admiralty Pier scratches. If he doesn't, then I don't really want him either. And it's not because I don't think that he can win necessarily. It's just the value that he presents relative to what I believe his chances of winning is going to be just way skewed out of proportion. I know it's hard to knock a horse that has a a grade one win to his name, but that Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland did not come back very strong. That race only produced one next out winner, and that was Everfast, who won a non-winners of one allowance race on dirt. You had a couple of Chad Brown charges in there, without parole, Raging Bull, who are very highly regarded and they all came out flat. Missed the board in the 4-star Dave at Saratoga, and that race just hasn't come back super strong. So I'm a little bit skeptical of the quality of that race. And again, it's not to take anything away from War of Will, really. I just think he's going to be overbet here. Whereas the other Mark Casse horse, March to the Arch, I just thought his last race was so impressive. That was a race where the pace did not come apart. The front end of that race really held together. Admiralty Pier was on the lead most of the race, and Silent Poet was in second the entire race. And those two horses were 1-2 until the very end when March of the Arch ran them down, and they ended up running 2-3. So March of the Arch was really the only horse to close that day, and he did so basically from last. I thought that was a very impressive win. He loves Woodbine. Should get an honest pace here, if not necessarily a blazing hot pace. So I really just think that he's stamped himself as the horse to beat off that last effort. I don't love the jockey getting off, Hernandez jumping on to War of Will, but I'm not too concerned about it. I don't really play the follow the jockey game as much at Woodbine as I would maybe Saratoga or somewhere else. And that's honestly just because I don't know enough about some of these connections. But yeah, I think that really March of the Arch is kind of the only horse in here that I won't make an argument against, or I struggle to make an argument against. I'll be surprised if we see bombs come up here, but a horse like Cheryl Spite would need to improve. He very well could, being that lightly raced, might be a monster, but I always prefer a horse that's actually pointed to a race. This horse was supposed to be going to the Derby a few weeks ago, had an issue pop up, had to scratch out or defect out, made a last second audible to the Woodbine Mile. This first time facing older, there's a lot of question marks there for me. Starship Jubilee, she has some monster races at Woodbine if you go back, towards the tail end of 2019, but most of those were against fillies and mares, so against restricted company. She has to take on the boys here, and that last race was honestly just kind of flat. Now, if she gets back to that form of late 2019, she's a huge player here, and she does get one of the hottest riding, turf jockeys at Woodbine with Justin Stein. But again, you're asking a lot for me to go onto a 7-year-old mare facing boys for the first time off of kind of a flat effort in the Diana. And then the other horse I expect to take some money is Value Proposition. And, Brisnet doesn't really like his speed figures as much. I know he looks better on buyers. To me, this is just a horse that I think is probably going to be overbet because it's Chad Brown. And Chad Brown just doesn't do that well at Woodbine. Statistically, he's fine. He's about 19%. But if you just look at some of the recent horses he's had run here, just this year, Cambier Park, failed as the even money favorite. Delaware failed as the 2-1 favorite. Etoli or Etoile or whatever that French horse is, failed as the 7-5 favorite. Competition of Ideas failed as the 7-5 favorite. Focus Group failed as 4-1. Raging Bull failed last year. You have to go back to July of 2019 for him to find a win here, which was in a grade 3. And there hasn't been a ton of starts in between. He's like 1 for 10 in the past year or so. But for me to take a horse that is going to probably get bet on connections, they always get bet up here. I just don't think this is what I would call a real Chad Brown. It feels like one of those Monmouth Chad Browns or one of those imitation Chad Browns. It's a nice horse in his own right, but there's a reason that this horse didn't race at all summer at Saratoga, despite being stabled there. And to me, it's because the horse just isn't that good. So to me, this race stops and ends with March to the Arch. I think some of those horses I poked holes in could very well hit the board or run underneath. And if I was going to take a second pick here, it would be Admiralty Pier, because I do think that horse gets a little bit loose on the front end if they try to rate back War of Will. And I don't think this horse can win. He couldn't win last time with a pretty cushy trip against March to the Arch, but he did hold on for second at 8-1. And I could very well see a similar trip happen for him today here.
All right. So Caleb and I both like the one, March to the Arch. Caleb also likes the 6 Admiralty Pier. If races here, and if Admiralty Pier does scratch out, make sure that you got War Will on your tickets. I think that's kind of the summary of this race. I like value proposition a little bit more than you do, and so I'll definitely be using him a little bit, but. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. We are on the wrong lead at wrong_lead. You can catch Caleb at CalebWVU, and I am at Cherry Drank, and we will catch you guys later.